Well, the simplest explanation is Jesus is a male chauvinist. He was hungry and he wanted a woman to prepare him food. But I don't think that really tells the full story. Yes, Jesus seems to get a meal out of it, end of the story. And he does include a woman doing it. To be exact, Peter's mother in law. But I think as a man in a mission, in a movement he's trying to create and get momentum going, that there's more going on to this story. So we find the story of Jesus healing Peter's mother in law, and we'll get back to that a little bit later, in Mark chapter 1, verse 29 to 34, Matthew 8, 14 to 17, and Luke 4, 38 to 41. I'm not going to pay much attention to Matthew's retelling of the story because he just seems to have it in there. He doesn't really want to embrace it, put it in a timeline. He just doesn't want to throw it out of the gospel as he's copying from Mark and adding it to his gospel. Luke, on the other hand, has some interesting perspectives on what happens in the story. But before I get ahead of myself, let's get right to it. Mark chapter 1, starting in verse 29. As soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon with Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about it. So he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them. So this, in the Gospel of Mark, is the first story of where Jesus does a healing. If you remember, a few verses before that is when Jesus is in the synagogue and he casts out an evil spirit out of a man, causing a lot of momentum happening in Capernaum, in which the crowds are drawn to him and they see him as a man of authority. But here now, after that, he goes to Simon's home, Simon and Andrew's home to be exact, and he brings along with him his two other disciples, James and John. And they go there, and there is an issue. You being an ish, me now, for Jesus. And that is that Simon's mother-in-law is sick. And it seems like right away that they bring this to Jesus' attention. Maybe Simon is kind of thinking, well, Jesus was able to heal the man with the evil spirit. Maybe he could help with my mother-in-law. So he invites him to his house, hoping that Jesus will do something with his mother-in-law. The challenge is that Jesus comes to Simon and Andrew's house, and Simon's mother is sick. So sick that she's in bed with a fever. So the obvious problem is the mother-in-law. She's sick. And I think it's more than just Jesus is moved with compassion here, which he does do a lot of miracles, and there might be some compassion within that. But I think it here that Jesus sees a roadblock to Peter joining him in his ministry, his mission. And that is, what kind of guy would you think Jesus was? If he came across Simon here, sorry, I keep calling him Peter, Simon, Peter, they do blend later on, but not yet in Mark here. He comes across Simon, and Simon's wife is concerned and worried about her mother, who is sick. And Jesus is like, well, just leave them all and come follow me, which is going to happen very soon. No, I think Jesus is like, I need to help you with your problem, and then you can come and help me with my work. Your problem is your mother-in-law is sick. I will fix that. And it is intriguing. Like in Luke, it reads that Jesus commanded the fever to leave her. But Mark tells it much more of a soft miracle. As it says in the Net Bible, Mark 1:31 says, he came and raised up her by gently taking her hand. Then the fever left her and she began to serve them. So Mark doesn't see this as a big boom, miracle, heal, like you watch those TV evangelists, be healed. No. Jesus just walks over to her in the bed, reaches out, grabs her hand, and helps her up on her feet. And just with that action alone, she is healed enough to then serve them, which then frees up Simon to go with Jesus on his mission. Because soon, and very soon, we're going to find out that he wants to travel around Galilee teaching, and he wants Simon to be part of him in this mission. So he heals Simon's mother-in-law, freeing him from his obligations to his wife at that moment. That then he can go and join Jesus in his mission.